Seconded by? Second by Mr. Garibaldi. Andy Byrne and Wayne Garibaldi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agendas have been approved. Those of you, we've all received the minutes and read them, I hope, from last meeting. We need to have those approved as well.
They looked good to me.
I'm looking at you since you're reaching for the mic.
Yeah. No, they looked good to me, so unless anybody has any corrections, I'll move to approve.
Okay. Are there any corrections or additions? All right, it's been moved by Mr. Byrne to approve the April 21st minutes. A second? Second. We're on a roll here. Mr. Garibaldi seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That has been approved. Okay. Last month, we set up a subcommittee for community outreach forums and a process, and our Vice Chairman, Katla, was in charge of that, so I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Hi, guys. Good evening.
Your mic's not on.
There we go.
Hello? There we go.
No.
Hi, guys. Good evening. So on the attached flyers that you guys should be able to see, and for Mr. Dahl, I will make sure that you are sent an email with the flyer. Additionally, what we went over in the community outreach meeting was that we wanted to make sure that our meetings were open to the public to be discuss their viewpoints through a survey. On the bottom left-hand side of the flyer, it currently has a join in person or virtually to attend this meeting. What we're doing instead is to have a survey monkey for people to fill out forms. That way it is a more orderly conducted meeting where we don't have dozens of people showing up and trying to voice their opinions at once, and we're here for hours. So this way we can still understand what the community wants and have it be more organized. On that survey, we have listed 3 questions. The first is, this upcoming redistricting could change the current leaders' districts in order to make a more fair division. Are you opposed to this, and why? And by the way, guys, if you guys have any suggestions, modifications, etc., please feel free to speak up. The second question that was voiced was, do you know of a community of interest that should or should not be divided? And the last question was a little more vague. What do you mostly want to see done? That way, if anything was not addressed, they could then address it. Additionally, it was brought up by Mr. Garibaldi that we should document any community input so that nothing is overlooked and that everybody has their voice heard. In order to help make sure that our strategy is fulfilled, the idea to help make sure that the community was involved in the process was to help distribute flyers throughout each of the 3 members of the subcommittee for the community outreach. And so we can attach it to bulletin boards and whatnot. Additionally, we will be posting it on social media on the Amador Gov Facebook page. And additionally, I'm talking to Heather about putting it on our website. That way it can be found there as well. So our goal is just to see higher community input, and we can make sure that we can still measure our success by counting how many likes, comments, shares we get, and we can see our numbers of responses on the survey that will be posted here once we can let the community know about our viewpoints and whatnot. here in a few months. Is it? In October? Yes. Okay, so, that seems like that's all. Does anyone have any questions for the subcommittee or me?
Sorry, a little awkward there. Is there a deadline for the survey when it closes?
As long as we have people that are, able to hear their viewpoints and whatnot, I'm looking at our, timeline. And, we just need to make sure that there's at least 2 public hearings, so probably by then would probably be a good timeline. But as for now, there's no steadfast deadline, except for the deadline for the entire map to be processed.
And is this like a advertisement that's gonna be ran in Ledger Dispatch, the buy and sell, or?
That's a great idea about the newspaper. That sounds like a great idea. But yeah, that could be distributed like that.
The flyer, obviously the information on the flyer isn't correct. This is a mock-up, right? So you guys will be working together to modify this. And to get this onto the social media first, I suspect, before, get it out, if anything. In fact, between the newspaper, the radio station, social media, that's probably the best, in my opinion, as opposed to the handing out flyers. I don't know what your other experiences have been. I see a lot of heads nodding that the flyers aren't the best thing to get out. We need to get out quickly. One of our later agenda items is dates for future meetings. I know that we want to have a public meeting, a public hearing with the Board of Supervisors, and the suggested time for that is next month or July? Which were you?
End of June. End of June, June 30th is the date that the majority of the board or all the board can make an evening meeting then.
All right. We've just heard of the survey and the survey questions. Does anybody have any input on it, or would you like to see them in the minutes or sent out tomorrow as soon as possible anyway, and to get some feedback back to the committee? Because I'd like to get that survey. I think we should probably get that survey started rather quickly, but I'd like to give it a little bit of thought and have everybody have a chance to have a little more input back to you and your committee. And then if you would then rush those comments through and whatever and put that together. When we have the capability of doing that survey, just like you did for the sandwiches, I suspect, right? Is that the same kind of thing?
That's correct, or we could create a Survey Monkey online,
Okay.
however.
One way or the other. Russell?
Before we kind of get too far into SurveyMonkey, I did just want to point out that hub site actually we do have the ability to have our own surveys embedded on there. There's a variety of different types of questions that you can have, like checkboxes, mix and match, all sorts of different things. And then it has, as soon as people answer it, it shows us, some analysis of how many people, this and that. So it's not SurveyMonkey, but it's basically the same thing. And I don't know if you already necessarily started on SurveyMonkey, but if you give us the questions, we can, have that on that site if that's how you want to go about it. And I did want to just add on real quick. You mentioned the flyer and the, I guess, kind of a questionnaire. In doing some research, we found a really nice template for kind of like a more written survey. I don't know if that's something you want to consider, but it's on this website called Common Cause. If you just on Google, if you type in Common Cause California Redistricting, they have informational material for redistricting, but also a template for kind of a more written type of survey.
Okay.
That sounds good. Thank you for your, input.
One more suggestion or recommendation of Volcano Vision has a local ad insertion that reaches their subscribers. So if you'd like to also kind of use the same ad on the radio station with the flyer, kind of as an underlay, that's another way or method.
Thank you.
Keith,
Sir,
over here. The flyer doesn't mention, the survey. It seems like that would be a really important thing to have on that flyer.
Yeah, it needs to be updated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is something we want to have on there. And if we can, when we have a solid one, we can get it all on an email that we can put up on our own, social medias?
Definitely.
Okay.
okay, the next step on this then, in order for us to get this out, so that we do have some, community input and hopefully substantial community input, prior to the, June 30, end of June meeting with the Board of Supervisors. What was that date again?
June 30th,
June 30th, okay.
the Wednesday.
I would ask that, when we get the information, the copy of this flyer, everything from tonight out to the commission members as soon as reasonable. And then I would ask the commission to respond within a day or two so that we get back to Caitlin and her, is that right? Contia. Sorry, I apologize. Her committee, who can then work with Heather to get this put together. And we'll coordinate that with you know, our hub site. It was a good suggestion, but the problem with that is we have to be able to make the community be able to get to that site. It's not, for example, jumping ahead here on one of my concerns, I search on the county website for redistricting and, you know, I get up comes
Right.
the Board of Supervisors is looking for people to volunteer for the commission. You know?
And we will have that up this week. So I've got IT working on that, as well as the creation of a website, or an email address just for this redistricting committee, so that any feedback will be directed towards that. And so, yeah, so those problems, those questions that you brought up, I think we're having headway on, and we should have it set up this week.
Okay, good. Is there anybody on the Zoom that would like to comment on the survey process or the flyer suggestion?
Just one issue I want to bring up. We do have 3 supervisors here, 1 on Zoom and 2 in person, so none of them can speak, or we create ourselves a Brown Act issue. So if you're wondering why they're being suspiciously silent.
Well, I was only wondering about Brian. I wasn't wondering about the other 2.
Nice one. I may have missed it. Do we have a budget of how we can proceed with this?
No,
Okay.
we don't have a budget.
We don't have a budget.
So we're working, yeah.
Well, I'm
yeah.
just thinking, you know, a lot of it is mentioned with social media and whatnot, and, you know, you get other folks out there that means nothing to them at all. So, getting some of these flyers out, possibly through the, community foundation, they have their workers go out and they'll put them on every post that they can do it. And I think they do that for about $75. So,
we could put something together for, you know, minimal expense. The thing we usually do, when the board's looking to get the word out on something is go do interviews with Jim Geedy on the radio, or get the paper to do an article, that kind of thing, which they're usually pretty amenable to. So, get it out that way.
I've also got a suggestion to maybe post it on the neighborhood network. Does anybody know how to do that? I see it, or I get an email every morning, and sometimes I respond, but it seems like there's a lot of people when I look at the people that are registered. So,
Is the neighborhood network the Nextdoor application?
yeah, that's what I mean, next door. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sure that could be
We have,
arranged.
yes,
I'm Ann Heisenbuttel, an alternate on the District 5. Could you repeat the 3 questions that you're proposing, please?
Definitely. So the first is, this upcoming redistricting could change current leaders' districts in order to make a more fair division. Are you opposed to this? Why? The second question is, do you know of a community of interest that should not be divided? Or should or should not be divided? And the last question, what do you mostly want to see done?
okay. Yes, Jan?
Jan Houghton, alternate for District 4. Are you going to explain what a community of interest is supposed to be?
I don't think that's a bad idea. We could definitely put a definition in there for those who don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, at the end of all this, is the outcome of the survey going to produce a document that a community of interest can use to apply, to submit to the committee on a cohesive basis, so that not everybody is handing in something different? So we want to know, A, who is the community of interest? B, where are they? C, how do they describe their community of interest?
So you're thinking that all 3 of those should be added to help?
I'm thinking all those should be on the final submission form for community of interest.
Oh, okay. Will you do me a favor and repeat that?
Jan, you're on the email list, right?
Yes,
So you'll get this. Could you put those back in a response on an email back to
absolutely.
the committee?
Okay, thank you.
There is a good, the city of Napa, not the county, but the city had a good questionnaire that they sent out looking for information on communities of interest. And, you know, how do you define it? What binds it together? What are the boundaries? What differentiates people in there from outside of there? Things like that. Those are all questions on communities of interest. So if you go to the city of Napa, County of Napa is still stuck on 2011, so you're not going to find much there. But the city has a good questionnaire.
Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Keith, if I may, I have a little issue with the first question. And if you're asking if they think it's a good idea to do this or not, it's like, it feels a little odd in that this is something that the county's required to do. So if they think it's a bad idea, I'm not sure that it kind of makes it sound like they think that we shouldn't do this, and that's not really one of our options on the table. So I'm not sure if we necessarily want to phrase it that way.
I'm completely with you. Right now, the wording is kind of makeshift for now.
Okay.
Until it gets kind of ironed out a little
All right.
more.
Well, and you're going to send this out so we can poke back with some suggestions. Okay,
Yeah,
that sounds
really.
good.
I have a minor thought. The open-ended questions where, you know, they need to write something, that's handy to, you know, get us all thinking. But the questions where you give them specific choices and they select specific answers, those, the software, probably both SurveyMonkey as well as the one that we have, it takes all those answers and it, you know, it lays it out in very readable chunks where you can kind of better make decisions. So for example, if you say, you know, which community of interest do you live in? And then you list, you know, 10 choices and say like 70% of people choose one. It's clearly visible and it's just kind of a little more faster, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Easier to see the results. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, on that first question, the term leader is used, so what are we really talking about?
Supervisor.
Okay. Then I suggest that's the appropriate word.
Mm-hmm.
All good points, and I'm sure overnight, in the next 24 hours, you'll probably come up with some additional concerns and comments to add on to. And if you also happen to have a suggestion like has been come forth from the Chuck and Ruslan about surveys that are available, we'll include those as well. So we'll move on from this topic. If there are no other.
I had one more question. Do you have like a minimum number of required responses in mind for the survey? No. Or do you have any plans for what you would do with information that was like an outlier, not really responding to the questions?
I think the committee has to, meet some of the requirements, and one of the requirements is to get as much community input as possible. So this is an initial effort to begin doing that. We obviously got 6 months before we're going to put anything together, so we will have 4 more open meetings with and inviting the public. All the meetings are open, but 4 public hearings that have been identified as public hearings for this particular issue. So this is our initial start, something that we want to get going as quickly as we can, particularly since we want to have the joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors on June 30th to get a night meeting in, which is also required to get this process going, to give us as well as the Board of Supervisors some idea of where there might be some community issues and concerns or individual issues and concerns. So I think I phrased that properly. Or
sorry if I may. It sounds like if there's outliers and stuff like that, it goes into the public record, and we will keep a record of that information, right? Sure. And so we may not do anything with it, but it will be in the public record. And if it becomes a point of contention, then we have a reference point to work from. Is the way I would read that.
And it's also information that will be passed to the Board of Supervisors, right, that they will have all that for their input as well.
One other question I have is, I believe on the Board of Supervisors website, they have a survey, or they had a survey out there, not regarding this, but what did they use? Heather, did they use like Google Forms, or was it another, where it redirects you to another site? On their any other surveys? I could be mistaken. I know working in the school district, we use, just anything we can set up that is generic to so we can use our own wording, so we don't have an outside source that has ads or anything that's popping up while we're taking the survey. So I think keeping it as simple as possible, like using a Google form, so that we don't have ads and all that jazz popping up for people to see while they're filling out the survey. It's just my 2 cents.
We could probably do that. I can find out what was used previously.
Yeah.
If I may, it sounds like I would want to make sure we keep all this stuff super tight, like using the hub, if we can get that to work, where it's, you don't want to have stuff coming off from different angles. You want it all very centralized, so when there's one source shopping, as it were, for information about this, it's all in the one place. And that's how the hub's supposed to work for this? Yeah, please.
There's a survey on the hub site. It's all the way in the bottom. It was just a blanket question, what district do you live in? It was just there for kind of temporary until we figure out what questions we want. But we do have the ability to have, our own survey, our own questions. And like I said, there's so many different types that you can have, not just write-in or checkbox. There's mix and match and all sorts.
So it can handle any of the things we're talking about.
Yes.
And we wouldn't need to go to SurveyMonkey.
Yes.
Like,
Correct.
personally, I think if we can keep it all tighter in one area, I think we'll be better served.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the suggestion was SurveyMonkey because that's what the committee
Sure.
was
No, I
familiar
get
with,
that.
and
Yeah.
not knowing that we had one of our own, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any objection to doing that. And the point is that you just made, that we want to have as much, if not all, information available and direct on that hub so that we can keep track of it for a variety of reasons. Good point. Okay.
We had a question from Ms. Thompson.
Just one more question too. Have you, with the sample survey on the hub, have you gotten any response or any statistics, traffic information?
Maybe I can show it. The way it breaks it down, there was 8 responses, and it breaks it into a little pie chart of how many responded to what. I mean,
Okay, let's move on to item number 5. Oop, you're gonna. While he's getting this, set up, just want to remind everybody there are, refreshments over on the table, and, if you don't eat it at the dais, you'll have to eat it on the way home, please.
So it'll be possible to have a direct link to the hub off on this flyer too, I would assume.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Don't forget to add that in your comments when you send it an email in tonight or tomorrow. Yeah, send it. We all need to send our communications to Heather, so that we avoid the Brown Act issues with sending them, to one of our committee members. But then the 3 committee members will get them ultimately. Yeah, I do want to remind everybody, just don't use reply all, please,
We also have a sign-in sheet that's routing. If you could pass that along and sign it, please. Thank you.
so the hub site has this survey linked. It's kind of, on our end, this is what we see, right? So we have the 2021 redistricting survey. And here there's, you can design it and you can export the data and whatnot, but there's a little analyze button here that. Oh. It is. Oh, sure. Oh, so, obviously I only had one question, so it doesn't really show much, but looks like District 3 and District 5 have the most responses. It can break it down in various different formats. I don't think map doesn't have the location. It depends on if you have your location enabled, but so it breaks it down here as well as a little more numerically here. So this is, what we have, and the design part, let's see, these are all the different types of, ways that you can ask questions. So we can get a little creative, but I guess the main thing is really to get questions first.
So can you tell, if it's one IP address or multiple, or does it go that deep?
On our system.
On our system, okay.
Okay.
So just, for example, I haven't played around too much with the different types of questions, but it looks like there's a question that you can ask with a map, right? I don't know exactly how we could utilize that, but it's out there.
Would you be able to tell if one person answered the question multiple times?
No, I don't think so. I don't actually.
I know I did.
Yeah. I think there are, because I know in SurveyMonkey you can specifically kind of lock people in to only doing it once. So once they click submit, they're done. Nothing to stop someone from opening an incognito tab and just doing it again, though.
And this has the same capability?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move ahead to item number 5, visualization discussion, review and discuss any members' visualization and issues related to hub use. It's kind of a twofold agenda item. I don't know how many commission members submitted visualizations to Heather in order to get them up so we could discuss them. Any? No. I saw an email from Stephanie, and if all of our people in our communities have to go through all the steps that you identified, it might be a little difficult. You did a lot of work, and don't think you probably have a visualization map in your hand either, do you? Or do you?
I do have one available.
But you were working with just one district?
Yes.
Yes.
Just for District 3.
Right. We're assuming that people and ourselves will be working with trying to modify all 5 districts to some extent. So, Chuck, can you help us out here? The question is, my question is, and I'm not intending to speak for anybody, but myself, and please, I want to have everybody jump in as the issues that you're having, but I'm finding it impossible for me to look at the districts and move one census tract and one census block from one place to another. I don't know which ones I want to move because I can't get the whole picture. My computer screen's only so big, and when I narrow down using the hub information, I narrow down to where I can see the numbers of the people in the census. I'll call them blocks, right? That's the right word. Then I don't have. I'm in too small of a space, so I don't have a real good sense of how to move you know, if I wanted to adjust between District 1 and, you know, and District 4, that are side by side, I think, I'm at a loss to do that. Is that troubling anybody else?
It's
Yes.
it's difficult when you have, we have over 1,300 census blocks, and you try to put any, you know, sizable number of them on your screen, and even if it's on a screen that big, if you had that in front of you to try and look at, you know, several at one time, and still be able to see the population and the census block number, because that's what that gets in the background really fast when you start to zoom out. You know, I understand that it's difficult. Even if you could see it all, you still wouldn't be able to manipulate the boundaries. You'd have to do that manually somehow.
Is there a way that we could get an identification number assigned to each district or each census block?
Each block has its own identifier.
Yeah, but we don't have access to that.
It's on the screen now, but the problem is,
can we get to that?
A little further. When you click on it, you'll get the census block number and you'll get the population. It's a 2010 population, unfortunately.
How did you get that?
Just click on any of the blocks.
That window. Okay, as soon as you click on a block.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to get it? Is there a way to get the identification number on the block, just like you see populations, so that you don't have to keep going back and forth to that window?
I think they're both on there if you zoom in close enough.
Well, I don't know if that'll be
the block
legible. There would be too many numbers on each block. You mean both, like for example, that block, the block ID as well as the population?
Yeah, the block ID and the population. So, I mean, because we don't know how to identify it. Even if we want to take the laborious act of doing it manually, we have no way other than just putting down the population and relating that way. We have no way of making a list of which blocks need to be moved and where.
So the block IDs, you know, they're specific to each block, right?
We can do it this way.
Okay.
But I was just hoping that it could be displayed like the population numbers are. Maybe the software won't allow you to.
It'd get too messy.
Okay.
Yeah, and the block ID is not necessarily relevant like the population number is. That's the crucial piece of information you need, or how many people live in that block.
Well, if you're gonna manipulate them, you got to know which block it is. I mean, but you can get that by clicking on the block as you go and try and
you can get it. Okay.
Adjust those boundaries.
Right. I'm just trying to make it less cumbersome, but this will work. I didn't realize that you could get that window popped up. So I was having the same problem that Keith described. And it did, by the way, Rosalind, thank you for adding the district boundaries on there for us. That helped a lot.
Chairman Sweet. Chairman Sweet, Mr. Dell would like to speak. Please go ahead when ready.
Okay, I'm ready. I've been working with a online program called Dave's Redistricting, and what I have found using the census tracts instead of census blocks, that many of the cities themselves are broken up into different groups, and many of the communities of interest are also broken up in different groups. Many of the tracts have their dividing line, for instance, Drytown into 4 different parts, or Amador City into 5 different parts. And it becomes very difficult to work with larger tracts if you're not coming down to the block level. I think we really need a tool that takes us to the block level so that we can actually keep those communities together as a whole. Because if we're dealing with the larger census tracts, the dividing lines always end up within a community, either an incorporated city or Pine Grove, for instance. Anyway, that's all I got.
Well, and to add to that, the census tract also incorporates, 3 different districts within it. So many of the tracts, are impossible to tell if you were using that as information in order to make some moves.
Yeah, you have to do it at the block level.
I think the only, in my mind, simple as it is, the only way I can deal with this is if I can get the census blocks, but I need to be able to see them in a larger context, because when I dial down to get the blocks, I lose the perspective of where I am on the map. That's my only comment and my only concern. I'm looking for someone who has and if this is a program being used nationwide, then somebody in Mississippi's got the same problem I've got.
Yeah, well, that's why dual screens are great.
If we can identify those areas that we know, we don't think need to be split, obviously, city boundaries, the census designated places that are already shown on the map, and then the communities of interest, if we can get our head around what we think those boundaries should be, then we could look at those individually, one at a time on the screen, and try and determine what those boundaries of those areas should be. Obviously, the cities aren't going to change. The census designated places probably won't change any more than what they are on the map, but the communities of interest, we can at least identify based on the population clusters of those census blocks, what they should be, and then keep those intact until we have the new data, and make sure that we're right about those. And then we can either add or subtract some areas depending on where the data takes us. But you're right, trying to do more than a small area at one time is going to be difficult.
Okay,
Can't see much.
that makes sense as maybe as a first step and maybe as the only step. I don't know. That seems sensible to, I can understand that. I'm not interested in all of Jackson. I'm not interested in all of District 1. I'm interested in where District 1, meets the Ione district. I'm interested in where District 1 meets up in Pine Grove, probably. But somebody else might be interested in a variety of different ways. So, and you can print those out for us in black and white or in color. Can you print them in color for 36 by 48 was a number I got earlier. If we could identify the specific areas of concern or.
Sure.
All right. How would it be best to come up with those areas of issue? Would you accept requests from the individual commission members?
We can do those that way. I would suggest that we start with the cities and the identified census designated places.
Okay.
Those are easy, and then look at what we think are the communities of interest.
All right.
I think those are going to be the most difficult to identify and put a boundary around.
I'm trying to think of a best way to just continue this discussion. Any comments from the commissioners?
Zoom in on the Dry Town and Willow Creek.
Commission members.
Chairman, Chuck, are you saying that the census designated places will be similar or the same from 2010?
Well, they're already identified for 2020.
Oh, we have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is a good example of, so it's got Dry Town as a census designated place. Zoom in so we can see the population numbers. It doesn't identify Willow Creek as a census designated place, but there are a lot more people in Willow Creek, which you would think that might be a community of interest, than there are in Dry Town.
Right, but you're following the federal guidance here on CDPs.
Yeah.
Well, and Dry Town just happens to be because it's incorporated.
No,
No, it's not incorporated. No, that's
No.
right. So that's
but
interesting.
but historically, it's been
Historically, it's a place.
Historically had more people at one time than.
Right, okay, that makes sense. So would it be possible for us to like talk about, say, a neighborhood my big thought was on the edges of between District, the Upcountry and District 4 and Pine Grove, there's these neighborhoods that literally have lines going through them. And so if we can look at those neighborhoods and make it so the line swings outside of that neighborhood or, you know, below that kind of thing, so they end up in one district. So would that be like targeting that neighborhood as a place of interest?
Yes.
Okay.
And we can do it at that scale. It's more manageable.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was seeing, and it almost doesn't matter what the census blocks say at that point, because some of these neighborhoods kind of sprawl along or weird, and they may be chopped up into a bunch of different census blocks.
And the blocks themselves don't.
Right.
Sometimes they're not.
And we just can't draw a line through a census
where they
block.
drew that boundary to begin with.
Right. So, but we just can't draw a line through a census block. That's our limitation with census blocks.
Right. Well, all the guidance we keep hearing is don't do it. The reason being is whatever number the census came up with for that census block, that's official information.
Right.
When you split it, it's not official anymore, and it's there's
It makes it difficult for the
No, that makes
elections
sense.
department.
I was seeing that. I was like, I work really well with when you have a parameter, and so that's the parameters. Don't do that. So let's just do that, and then you don't have to open any cans of worms on that.
Is there a downloadable map available on the hub that you can manipulate or edit?
Real quick, I'd like to point out all of the data that we use is available to download and use.
Could you show us how to download it?
Yes. So I made this isn't a free, well, let's do that actually. I made a free account. Let me just log into that real quick. And it lets you access all this data. I couldn't log into my account, but it doesn't matter because on your account, you'll be seeing the same thing, right? If you go to map, that's where it kind of lets you just add free data that's publicly available, and you can kind of make your own things, but you can't really edit it in the same way that you're probably thinking. So this is the way it works. So you want to add data, so you click on add, you'll search for layers, right? Right now it's searching from my content, but if you're, this is just content that we have, but you probably won't have any data unless you import something yourself. So you'll click on ArcGIS Online. So this lets you search literally everything that's available on ArcGIS Online. So a keyword, obviously Amador, right? So this pulled up 89 layers that have the keyword Amador in it. But since there's, things like this here that doesn't really pertain to us, you'll obviously want to filter it by you want to sort it by owner. So anything that, has by Amador planning, that's us. So, Sutter Creek city limits, Amador city limits, District 3, District 5, it's a little out of order, but Jackson Supervisorial Districts 2000, District 2, Plymouth, CDPs, 2010 blocks, current city limits, et cetera, you can use this, and you can plug it in. So 2020 blocks, we plug it in. you want to see just District 1, you can plug that in, right? And but kind of the issue with this, though, is what more can you do, right? This is what's free, and we already kind of have this, on the hub, but, it does let you at least access it, right?
So just to recap, you go to add,
Yeah.
search for
Layers. And then specify that you're searching in ArcGIS Online. Keyword is Amador, but since there's so many things, you'll want to sort it by the owner. And luckily, we're up there on the alphabetical list. So anything really by Amador Planning is the data that we have.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Everybody can get to that?
I mean, you have to make, a free account with Esri and go for it that way, but I don't know necessarily how.
I mean, currently the hub's not set up to do this.
Well, you'll just
have a
be
password.
recreating.
You'd have to create your own free account to do that.
But since this is data that we already have, that, we posted on the site, it's already available, right, through that redistricting hub, so.
So am I thinking this through? Because this past month, when I was looking at this, it's just the 2010 data. So in my infinite wisdom, I contacted the school district and to see if I could find building permits, not necessarily, but actual building permits where they would have to pay bond fees, to see where, if we wanted to add to the 2010 data, where's the chunk coming in? Where are these chunks at? And it was a little difficult. I mean, it could be done, but that was my thought process, is where are these areas that we're going to have to focus? So when we're looking at this in detail for, say Jackson or Ione, what areas do we think are going to increase based on those building permits?
Can I jump in on that question? I think this question, how many people are in each district now, supervisorial district now, based upon the 2019 information that we have? Do you have that number?
Not on the top of my head, but we can get it based on
you can get that number.
As long as those 2019 census block groups don't overlap district boundaries.
And can you
I
add
imagine they do.
And can you add that data to the layer that contains the blocks?
I'm sorry, say again?
Can you add the 2019 population data to the block data layer?
I don't believe so, because the block groups are much larger than the blocks, right? But the population data in the block groups, which are the big ones, that's all it is. That's all that population is for that giant block group. It's not whittled down for each of the blocks.
And that's not a usable map. That's what I told Chuck earlier. I just took that one and turned it over, because the blocks include pieces of each, in some cases, pieces of districts, in some cases it splits census tracts. What we want to deal with are the numbers in each individual census tract. But you can tell us, to get back to your question, you can tell us how many people, based upon the 2019 Department of Finance information, or whoever's information that was, are in each supervisorial district as they're currently established, correct?
I think we can get really close to that. Like I said, as long as those census block groups those boundaries don't cross over the district boundaries.
Right. I mean,
depending on how much they cross. I know they're going to cross over.
So Richard Forster has 10,000 in his, and Supervisor Reneto has, 5,000 in his, obviously we've got ourselves some differences. I'm picking those numbers out of the air, ladies and gentlemen. But based upon the 2019 information, we know that each district should have roughly 6,885 people in each district. That's after having eliminated the prison population in total from the financial, numbers out of the Ione district. So I guess if I'm correct, and I want Chuck to correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at roughly trying to make 5 districts. If our goal is number one, to make them equal, as according to the stated criteria that we're working under, we'd be looking at roughly 6,885 on the 2019 data. And so if we know that, and if we know how many are there in each supervisorial district based on the 2019, that would give you a sense of how many people you have to move from one district to another in order to balance them out. The question then becomes, where are the areas from which can you see areas? And Chuck's suggestion was, we're not going to have to look at downtown Ione because no one's going to split that up. I don't think. But we didn't. The peripheral areas are are places where we'd have to give those numbers, and those would be the maps that we would probably be requesting. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I follow, but I think after watching the webinars, it sounds like we're going down not the track. We're like basically trying to tinker with the districts we have now. And I was kind of, when watching the webinars, they were saying that's not how we should be doing it.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that those are the numbers that you need to work with. And you need to, if you have a visualization of one thing and Tom has a visualization of something else, and he would be requesting maps that are more definitive of a particular area that I think I hear Chuck saying we can request.
Yes. But I think I get Andy's point is, if you know what the population is now of each district, and you're just trying to adjust those current boundaries so that it evens it out, you're not really looking at the individual census blocks and the communities of interest in order to make that happen.
Well, the numbers have to be the same, no matter what design you come up with.
I understand that. But we're starting, the visualization we're using is the current districts that we have. And I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know what the right answer is, but I really got a strong impression from the webinars that really isn't how we should be approaching it. We should be like approaching it by finding all the communities of interest, getting them identified, and then creating our boundaries where they make the most sense, regardless of what has happened in the past. And I don't know if anybody else got that from those webinars, but that's the take home I got from them.
Well, I got the same thing,
okay.
But I was also visualizing when they were talking that they were talking about areas that are the folks who were speaking from larger,
for sure,
political areas and more cumbersome areas,
for sure,
and more definite communities of interest than more defined community of interest than we have in Amador County.
Yeah,
I understand your position. I don't, and I think you're absolutely correct. But Mr. Garibaldi wants to speak.
I would agree more with Keith. I got exactly the same thing, that we shouldn't, form an opinion of what the map should look like. But I think without a starting point, it's a problem. So I think, in other words, because we may have some very dramatic differences that we know that this district as it sits now needs to shrink considerably, and this district needs to grow considerably. And I'm not really getting the sense that the public wants us to throw darts at the dartboard, in terms of that, meaning I'm not sure that the public's upset with how the districts are more or less lined out. I was talking with a supervisor who's not here anymore, but I'm having a struggle with communities of interest in thinking we're going to get something that's mappable, because that came out of that webinar as well, is that you can have this community of interest, but if it's not mappable in some way, shape, or form, it's just a community of interest, okay? So to me, having a starting place where we can say this is kind of where the number of districts we have, if we could slice and dice and say, hey, we could either have 4 districts or 7 districts, that's not on the table. We're going to have the same number of districts. It seems like getting a starting point of how out of whack we are. And the other thing that Chuck mentioned is that we currently have a lot of districts that are census blocks that are split, and we're going to have to fix that. And that sounds to me like a lot of fixing. So I don't want to get too caught up in my, at least in my personal mind, of reinventing the entire wheel. So.
And we'll have a better sense probably in another month or two after having community input as to where community of interests lie that we might not be anticipating or considering at the moment. We'll see. Comments from...
do we have the CDP map on the list?
Sorry?
Is the CDP map on the list, census designated places?
Those are all.
That's it, that's
They're
it?
showing up now in Pine Grove, Red Corral, Pioneer,
Okay.
according to Fiddletown.
And we can get more finite on those?
You can come in and get the census, the 2020 census blocks, but with the 2010 census data.
So let me just explain what the slider does real quick. So the CDPs that are there, those are the most current ones, right? The red census blocks, those are 2020 census blocks. These are new census blocks. When you slide it back, this is all basically kind of existing supervisorial districts, 2010 census blocks, and obviously 2010 population numbers. So both of these, you know, when you slide it, both have the CDPs, but the red are 2020 census blocks.
Yeah. Heather?
Chairman Sweet, we have Mr. Dell with comments. Please go ahead when ready.
Please do.
Thank you. I can tell you that with the visualizations I've been able to accomplish online, I started out the map with the larger scale census tracts and no existing supervisory districts. And I would suggest that, especially if we can get layers down to the block level with the population of each block, it would be instructive to attempt to draw initial maps, at least maybe as an exercise, without visualizing the current supervisorial districts at all, and just see what they end up looking like.
So just to jump off that, we do have the redistricting app, right? The actual application that we're going to be using to create the districts, right? With that app, we can import things that we want as kind of like stencils, you could say. So, you know, we could have these census designated places in that app, and we can, you know, draw the boundaries when it comes time in accordance with, you know, things that we want there. So city limits, we can put them in, and we can draw districts around them or whatever we need.
And the best way to do that would be in a group session to begin with?
I think so, because that's the only way everybody's gonna be able to see that application at one time.
Okay.
That was the version that, we
Not
could
objection.
buy one, you know, the one version for the planning department to use, but it was way too expensive to buy the public version that everybody could have access to.
When was that census data supposed to be out, Chuck?
In October.
And it'll be interesting, at least researching building permits and whatnot, and talking to some of the county folks, and the school district as well. The fact that this is going through 2020, how many families ended up merging into single homes. And being a school teacher, I've seen it. You know, we've got kids that are in a family of 9 now, when they were in a family of 4. So we're getting that kind of data too in all this. It just, my head just about imploded after I started thinking about all of it and thought, wow, this is close to impossible.
COVID implications,
Absolutely.
that April 1 census date, which was right as that was starting to really ramp up.
Yeah.
The things that happened after that aren't included in the data.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns?
I think that maybe we should make it a priority that everyone sets up an account and at least looks at least a little bit at the ArcGIS. That way we at least have a basic understanding of what we're getting into. That way when everyone comes together, we're not all staring at each other.
Just so, I'm just kind of a little worried that, so this right here is publicly available, literally for anyone. So you don't necessarily need to make an account because you're just kind of recreating this because you can't manipulate it anyway, right?
What's on the hub is the same information that's publicly available. We don't have anything special right now.
So if we were to go through that route where we were doing like that, the keyword Amador and then searching for Amador planning and whatnot, you don't need an account?
You don't need to. That's just, I guess, some people want to download this data and whatnot.
Okay,
for that.
To download. Okay, thank you.
The actual hub site and those, and that's kind of what we want to know. So right now we have, this is publicly available to anyone, no account needed. You can even, access it on your phone. And right now we have these 3 maps here, right? We have just the basic supervisorial districts, 2000 through 2010. This is the map that we've just been looking at all day today with census blocks with the CDPs. And then this third one is just a 2010 population cluster map. And part of what we wanted to know is, what else do you want to see that can help you is what I was hoping for with, hearing your input.
Sure, thank you. Knowing that, I think at least then, if not making an account, at least just familiarize ourselves at least a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, real quick, the survey is right there. So, it's right there. And then,
So at this point, we have, the members will be responding to the survey information that they'll be receiving in the next couple of days. We'll get some information from Chuck in terms of the supervisorial current district numbers, and knowing that we have to work toward a 6,900 average if they were going to be roughly equal. And with respect to this information, you'll send us links to get into this and some information to get deeper into that okay, so we can have that. And then we'll have another month to play with it. Any other concerns or with respect to item number 5? We have a promise from Mr. Eiley that this website will be readily recognizable and available and easily searchable by the members of the public by the end of the week. And be able to find it. That will be good.
Right. Never mind.
Yeah, you had the same trouble I had.
If you add in the keyword hub, it pops up on Google. It's the Esri kind of, it's their lingo.
And that's why we'll need to advertise that, to let people know that that is, the hub does mean this, the whole central thing. It goes back to the beginning of the meeting where we advertise it. That's how you get to all the centralized information.
Right. But the general population is not going to know the word hub, even based upon our outreach. If they're interested in just redistricting, they're going to be Amador redistricting, you know, so that should be able, we should be able to get to that rather quickly that way.
But we're gonna, part two of what Chuck was saying is we're gonna link it to the county's website, right?
There you go.
Because that's typically, I put Amador County, you know, and then I look for the county government site, and then I look to find what I need on there.
Yeah, that's what I said. I think we should just have a button on the website that's just says redistricting, just like we do for COVID, you know. If I want to know how many people got COVID last week, I just hit that button and I find it.
Can we add the word hub to the marketing material?
That's what I was saying, for sure.
I don't know if
I agree on both sides. Keith, you're absolutely right. It should be really accessible, but we should also just advertise it so if somebody just, any way they're coming at it, they'll be able to find it. That's kind of the goal. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Have we exhausted number 5 at this point?
I feel exhausted.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
I'm sure I'll be just as confused next month, so I'll probably have more questions. Dates for future meetings. We have as long as the commission members don't object, it's recommended by the county to have a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors at 6 p.m. on June 30th. So put that on your calendars. And so my question to the commission would be, our normal meeting, were we to be meeting on a monthly basis, would be the Wednesday before that.
That seems like a good idea.
Pardon?
I said, that seems like a good idea, actually.
It does to me too, because otherwise we'd be going from tonight to a joint meeting. I think we need to have some more discussion prior to that. So without objection, can we calendar,
June 23rd?
June 23rd, 6 p.m. in these, do we have a conflict with that date, Heather?
I don't have it up at the moment, but I believe it would probably be free.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll let you know.
All right. So, without objection, we'll target that date for our next meeting with a subsequent meeting with the Board of Supervisors the following week. And that meeting will also be at 6 p.m. I said that earlier, right? Okay. All right.
At least I won't be 2 hours ahead then.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm two time zones ahead of you tonight.
Any other items or questions or concerns with respect to anything that you might have? See, all the members are staring at their sandwiches, so we will call this meeting to a close. It's adjourned. Thank you, members of the public, for joining us, and we'll see you next month.
I'll be gone. I'm here for the joint meeting, and I'll email Heather, but I'm gone. I'm in Michigan on the 23rd. I don't think that's gonna happen. I intend.
Please take a sandwich or two with you, please. Is everything, left over, Mr.